Welcome in to Rates and Barrels. I am not Derek Van Riper. No, I am Chris Welsh. You hear me on Tuesdays. You're going to hear me through the way through. That over there, that's Eno, Saris, and Eno. We got a DVR baby coming. So I have stepped in as Al is stepped in as well.
At the hospital right now. The weirdest part about having a baby, I think, especially the first one, it gets a little bit easier afterwards. But the first one, you're like, oh my God, okay, go back. Like, oh, we gotta go. And then you get to the hospital and you're like, oh. It's like another 14 hours. So just
I remember
waiting.
For my son, we got to the hospital. My wife was 2 weeks late. 2 weeks late.
Oh, wow. So you're about to get induced.
And we were in the hospital. We get there and it was 24 hours. And at some point it got so late. We had a camera on our dogs and our dogs had not been happy about it. It was about 6 a.m. I drove home. I have never been as tired as I was in that moment of driving to take care of our dogs. And I was like, I'm going to take a nap at home for a minute. And the terrifying, like, will I miss our kid? And I barely could sleep and came back. And DVR is obviously not dealing with that. DVR is at the hospital. And hopefully we'll have the baby Van Riper coming very soon. But the bat signal was called. And it is now just, it's you, me, and Al for the foreseeable future, which obviously everybody's going to feel comfortable because you are here as we do our best to try to, make everything Rates and Barrel-ish, if you will.
Yeah, correct? But in terms of smooth sailing and keeping the ship going and creating rundowns and stuff, not my forte. Yeah.
So there might be a little
fly by the seat of the pants.
Yeah, so you guys might get a little bit more of a feel of Al or myself, and I'll even be on the Monday episodes. But I am going to be on these Tuesday episodes moving forward, and the big thing about that is we're going to be talking about really, the future of fantasy prospects, dynasty, all that type of stuff. We'll also be answering your questions, which there was an email set up. I think it's ratesandbarrels@gmail.com. If you guys do want to send in questions kind of as we go and move forward that we can access and we can bring on here. But you can find me on Twitter at @IsItTheWelsh. You can find Eno at EnoSaris. And my Dynasty ranks are live. Funny enough, the episode we did last week, I wasn't sure when it was going to happen. And then bam, like as the episode posted, the ranks are up. So they've been live on The Athletic for just about a week. And I will tell you this, I don't know your experience with it. That is my first experience, obviously, with publishing an Athletic article. It was overwhelmingly positive. And I don't feel like that is the norm. Not to say that Athletic subscribers are not wonderful people, but just posting anything like that into the world, it was overwhelmingly positive.
It's a big battle.
I made a post on there. I was like, I appreciate you guys not crushing my soul immediately in there, but it was pretty overwhelmingly positive. And there is a top 400 up there for everybody. Have you had that experience? I mean, you're posting so much. I don't even know if you bother looking in the comment section anymore. I mean, it's healthy to do, but also, for our own mental health, maybe sometimes don't dig in. But you're a smart guy, so it's probably a lot smoother sailing for you in the
I sometimes the pitching ranks can get a little sticky near the bottom. What I do is I get in there early. It's more positive early, and then I get out before they come in and tell me how much of an idiot I am.
Get the 5 or 6 Athletic burner accounts, hit the thumbs up, and just start moving it up. That's how we do it. That's the algorithm.
Bob.
I like the Eno burner account idea. So today on the episode, we're going to be talking about the Dynasty ranks. We've got some cool stuff. Funny enough, is we do have the last remnants of our dear friend DVR before he goes on his leave here, because he had kind of put together a pretty good rundown going through the Dynasty. So we'll keep this. I've added a few things. We'll kind of keep talking through there. And I don't want to get into strategy or anything, but like because we talked about it last week, but if there's any other thoughts you want to throw into it before we talk about the ranks, I posted in the article multiple things. First off, one of my leading sentences was, I don't hate your team. I don't hate your prospects. I don't hate your favorite team. I don't hate any of those. This is just how I do it. And I also tried to lay out my rhythm of this. And my rhythm is 3-year window is how I attempt to associate this. I will be higher on some of the younger guys, even though they might not help. But I took the approach of a 3-year window when I put this together. And I know, like I said, we talked about it a little bit last week, but is there any other strategy things that you want to throw out as far as Dynasty goes? Because they're not all created equal. Even the Otano, I just started one of those, last week. Me and DVR started the podcaster leagues, Otano leagues.
Otano,
yeah, I'm sorry, Otano. And those are created differently. I'm currently in a slow auction with those, but I am in kind of a win now mode. So is there any other Dynasty stuff you want to attach to this before we start talking about players?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to do is, obviously we'll get to the ranking a prospect against an actual major leaguer. That's really tough, and that's something that happens, but that doesn't happen in the first. What you got Corbin Carroll at 24, but he's already hit the major league. So where's your first?
The first guy that has not hit the majors is Jordan Lawlar.
Lawlar at 45 there. So
you still Jordan Walker. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're next to each other essentially. Okay. Yeah. Top 50.
You have you have 40 players that played in the major leagues first. And I think other than where do you put a Walker versus actual major leaguers? I think it's fascinating to see this sort of glut of mid-career but 30-year-old veterans. Where you have Jose Ramirez, Trey Turner, Aaron Judge, and Mookie Betts on the back end of the top 10. Putting them against somebody like Tatis with his question marks. Even Witt, there was a really good beginning for Witt, but just a question of, what's his position going forward? How good are his plate skills going to be going forward? If he's going to settle in around 300 OBP, that's I don't think he's going to be better than Jose Ramirez, Trey Turner, Aaron Judge, and Mookie Betts, right?
Well, but that's the assumption that he doesn't actually improve. That's the most difficult thing I think about this, especially with the first seasons that Chourio and Bobby Witt had was, there are a couple warts. You're picking out a wart specifically right there with Bobby Witt, but that's under the guise that this is not a player that wouldn't increasingly improve their game, and they would maybe, continue exactly who they are or maybe stall. Jonathan India is someone that comes to mind when I think about the Bobby Witt situation. That was a guy that had a phenomenal first year, hitting over 20 homers, 10 stolen bases, and then he just tanked. And that's kind of the battle I think a lot of these sophomores have. Bobby Witt specifically is which side of that's going to go. And in a 3-year window, Bobby Witt versus Jose Ramirez is close and tough. And I actually kind of think it's a tier. When I look at this, when I look at my top, let's say really 12, 13, top 13 of my dynasty, I think that is a big clump. And if you wanted to adjust it for the most part, I think you can. I'm personally am probably a little bit more stringent about maybe my top 5 being that order. And then after that, it's kind of a clump where you're hey, listen, I want position scarcity with Jose Ramirez and the stolen bases. I trust that more than, potentially some of the bat skills of Bobby Witt, except Bobby Witt's 22. So by the time Jose Ramirez is 33, 34, Bobby Witt is getting into the prime of his career. That's the battle of these dynasty ranks, and especially that first round.
Yeah. There's some aging curves that I've seen that suggest that players don't improve anymore as a group. I'm not saying no young player gets to major leagues and doesn't improve. Aging curves sort of suggest that there's more of a plateau to 26, 28, and then just going down. And there could be some kind of change in the way baseball works that would speak to that, which is maybe we're getting better at player development and better at scouting and better at putting players in the right at the right time. So there isn't that much more improvement that they have to do. They just sort of are their athletic best, when they get in there. If you think about sprinters, sprinters can hit their top speeds, in their young 20s, so athletically, your peak is sort of the mid 20s. But baseball has these learned skills, right? These learned skills like plate discipline or shape appreciation in terms of oh, I know what this curveball looks like. I know what these sliders look like, picking up different pitches, knowing how pitchers are trying to pitch you, all these sort of game skills that I think they push players peak later because as you're playing, you're accruing these game skills and your athleticism is going down, but your learned knowledge is going up. And so there's this relationship between the two. So I think Bobby Witt in particular, there seems to be like something that can improve there, which is just, in terms of not chasing as much and maybe being a little bit more patient to kind of add that average in OBP to what already seems like really good sort of athleticism.
Well, like what you're saying is maybe this is something that's a battle between these two, where if you're talking about an age curve, the most likely piece of athleticism that's going to go on the age curve is the speed. And that's something that long-term projecting, like even if I'm looking at this list, I'm trying to find like, there's a lot of guys that have had some solid stolen base numbers, but once they hit those 30s, what's going to happen? We've already seen,
I think that's why you got like Turner and Betts down there at 11, 13, because
and Trout.
If Turner steal, like I know that the rules change is a real big question mark for this year, but if Turner steals like 20 bags this year and hits 15 homers and is 31 going into next year, I think this ranking will look completely right.
Yeah, well, I mean, and look at Whit Merrifield. That's another one of those that was high numbers as the age comes. But that's kind of my point. If you come back to the Jose Ramirez versus Bobby Witt situation, Jose Ramirez is hitting his 30-year-old season, and he's been stealing bases. If the athleticism does start to tinker down, you're dealing with Bobby Witt's plate improvement and skill set improvement as far as the bat goes versus a potential decline in athleticism at 30 years old plus for guys like Jose Ramirez. So which side would you want to go on as Ramirez gets older? Again, there's not necessarily a wrong answer, because like as I am trying to build a dynasty league, I want win now guys. I want to win now as best as I possibly can. I just took Bryce Harper in that dynasty I was telling you about. I always screw up the name. What is the history behind Otano? Otano?
I think it's Otanu. I call it Otanu.
Yeah,
but I'm not really somebody to ask about pronunciation, but Otanu.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like a German name, so it'd be Otto Neu, but nobody says it that way. So
I mean, I think we should say it that way. That should be the way. Otto Neu. We should say. But like in the auction, I just took him, but because I got an insane deal on him. Bryce Harper. I took Bryce Harper.
Oh, right.
I got him at like $26 in a startup dynasty, which was like a phenomenal deal. It's a win now piece with
plus it's a 40-man roster there where like you can at 12-team 40-man roster, you can probably just do some sort of outfield platoon until he comes back. So
yeah, well, I mean, I did the crazy stuff. I also took Buxton, which no one's going to be surprised about. Also got Luis Robert. So I mean, I've got volatility through the roof in a dynasty, but yeah, the declining skill thing is like, it's a really interesting battle. And if you notice, like inside the top 25 of mine, I only have 2 players that are over 30 years old, like not 30, but 31 or higher. And it's Mike Trout and Freddie Freeman. And those are at this point, built in. You're not going around speed. You're just going around bat to ball skills, and you're going around, 4 categories, which both of those play for you. So yeah, it's an interesting thing in there. And it's an interesting dynamic of battling the young guys versus the old guys in dynasty that everyone has to come to terms with. You know what? Let me ask you this. In the top 15, let's assume it's like Roto. What do you hate the most? Like, who's the rank you hate the most of my top 15? And then to make me feel better, pick one that you love.
I think okay. The names that hurt. No, yeah, it seems mostly fine, and it's also hard in the top 15. You're picking the nets. You're talking about like 1 or 2 spots, and that's the big deal because it's top 15. I think Turner below Jose Ramirez. I'm not so sure about that because even though we had that whole conversation about speed and everything, Turner is still elite in speed. He's 95th percentile in sprint speed. So I don't think it's going to drop off that fast. And when I have a little bit of a bias when I look at Jose Ramirez, I think.
I think we all do. Yeah. The body just doesn't seem to sometimes match the continued return.
Like this barrel-chested dude. He looks slow. He's not slow, but he looks slow. It's a very strange thing. So I don't know if that's just a bias. Kyle Tucker. I think he just has the potential to change this list because we're heading into this year with the shift rules. He gets shifted a lot. And
good point.
He's 26, so this is like prime peak year situation. So I think if he goes like 330 this year, which is not at all impossible, like it's not even that far off from his projections. So if he goes 330 this year, I think he and Tatis comes back and is not quite what he was, or if Witt doesn't take a step forward, or if Vlad is like, no, I'm just going to hit 300 with like 25 homers every year and not get that sort of 30, 35 level again. I think Tucker could move past some of them.
Yeah, I think 4 is kind of his spot where he could go. I'd also point out something I had to mark on here is what I presented to everybody was a daily moves list. And that is why Shohei Ohtani's number 1. Because if you're in a daily moves league, it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. Like, I don't have to have any other analysis. It doesn't matter. Shohei Ohtani is 2 elite players. He's number 1. It's end of discussion.
Right.
But if he is 2 players, which is so silly, or he is 1 player in a weekly format that you change, I also gave you the rank on the dynasty list, and that would move him down, and that would inherently move a lot of these players up. It would move Tucker up a spot.
That's right. That's right.
It would move everybody up 1
because
spot.
Shohei Ohtani, the bat, is not a top 10 prospect, I don't think. I mean, util only.
It's close. I have him right there. The util only is the thing that, like, when you're talking about Turner versus Ramirez at about the same age has a little added gimme for the third base. So if you're talking about position scarcity,
but I can see you putting Ohtani ahead of those old guys. Yeah,
but that's where Ohtani
right around Yordan Alvarez and stuff. One thing that's also interesting to me about Yordan Alvarez is the knees apparently aren't that great.
Yeah, well, at 25 years old, he's already had multiple issues with it. And, you know, when you look at this list too, like the injury guys, the injury worries in this top 12 are Alvarez, Tatis Jr., and I think that's really it when you look at those 2. And those are 2 very popular names, 2 sub 25-year-old guys. Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. And those are 3 25 or younger players that already have some injury issues. Alvarez is probably
it's weird because also your injury outcomes are better if you have it younger. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like the earlier
pitchers.
Yeah, Labrum and so I like your rankings. I like your ranking of Bo Bichette because I think it must have been tempting to put him higher. And you know, he's 25 years old, power and speed. But the speed is not elite. The power isn't elite. The hit tool might be elite, but I also see him as someone that may have to move off the position.
Really?
Not now, but in the 3-year window, 28 years old, probably not then either. But he might be one of those people that when they sign their first free agent contract, it is not to be a shortstop.
What did you see the report that he said it's a concerted effort to run a ton more this year? It was like statements, I think, when he first came to camp. Camps haven't officially opened. They're going to be opening up on Wednesday. Not every single player is going to report, but literally first words out of his mouth were he wants to run more. I mean, I know that's the best shape of our life type of thing we're getting into. Everybody wants to hit more and throw faster and run. But is that something you think Bo Bichette can do?
He could theoretically benefit more from these rules than anybody because he's obviously sort of right where you shouldn't run. Like last year, he got caught so often. You'd be, as a coach, you're like, yo.
But also the team didn't run. That was my worry with that team as well. I think they were bottom 10 in the league. They were 10th, I think, from the bottom in stolen base attempts last year. I know that because I've talked a lot about Varsho versus Arizona going to Toronto, and Arizona was top 5 in the league. I just worry about that team when you have those type of bats, the necessity they feel to want to run.
Right.
And I feel like as these prime players are getting older, the need or the press for that team to want to steal is becoming less. It's just the elephant in the room is what is the bases coming in? What is that 4.5 inches of extra room you have from first to second? What is that going to do to coaches? Do they see the advantage and will they take advantage? Have you talked to anybody yet about any type of scheme with that? Is anybody going to be attempting to go take it like that is an advantage? Do teams acknowledge that that's a new advantage that they might want to go with?
Yeah, I've got an interview with Stephen Vogt that's going to publish this Friday on this feed where we talked a lot about what it was like from the catching standpoint, what it was like to be a catcher throwing people out and who he thought might take off more often. So I think that we kind of agreed that it's going to be a little bit more of these people that are tweeners, these guys who had 3, 4, 5 stolen bases before, maybe even a Bo Bichette, where he did get I think 10 stolen bases, but he got caught a few times, like too many times. So like maybe that will affect those guys. But one of the ways that we can tell the earliest is that actually just attempt rates by team in spring training have signal in them. They're interesting. They mean something.
Oh, okay. That's something we're gonna have to monitor.
So just if you see a team that's like taking off a lot, then you can sort of mark everybody up. And one of the teams that I think I'd be watching very closely is the Oakland A's, because they've got Esteury Ruiz, Ramon Laureano, even somebody like Nick Allen. They've got young guys in a lot of places. And they could also benefit from a little YOLO, like what else they really got going for them. It's not going to be a really good team, so maybe they could be the go A's. So
yeah, Tony Kemp in there as well. Is that
the
almost
Marlins
reminds me?
Might be a team that I think about, because they're also young, but they're also singles hitting. So maybe they'll have to push the go button a lot to turn those singles into doubles. I mean, they've got a bunch of second basemen who hit singles. Like maybe all of them are going to go 10-20, 280, 10-20. Maybe they just want a whole team of Jean Segura.
Which would be amazing. That kind of reminds me of like what the Diamondbacks did last year with they were not typically a running team, but Rojas and McCarthy then all of a sudden go 20 plus. And it was like, it's just a younger, more athletic team that wasn't finding the bat outside of Christian Walker. I mean, I guess Varsho as well, but I don't know if you want to call it like manufacturing runs or anything like that, but you want to put yourself in the best position. The A's are and I think that's why like Esteury Ruiz, he's on this dynasty list. He's actually one of the most difficult prospect versus dynasty guys for me, because his prospect prowess has kind of dropped, I think, a little, at least in my eyes. This is a guy that I used to love and tout before anybody liked him, and then he fell off and he came back. But his like 1 year perceived value in dynasty, or even 2, is much higher than the long-term prospect value of him, because it's like if he's going to steal 40 bases this year for the A's, that value is so much higher than what we would go as like a full potential, because he's not a 5-tool player. He looked like a 5-tool player. I watched him when he was with the Royals and he got traded to the Padres.
Thank you. I got some pushback because I was talking about his hard hit rate, and somebody's like, well, did you take the bunts out? I'm like, yo, I could take all the bunts out of his exit velocity numbers and he would still not be a guy who hits the ball that hard.
Well, and he hasn't hit the ball hard since he was here in Complex. He was crushing the ball when he was here. It was like mini Alfonso Soriano that people would see. The swing very wide open. It had a path similar to Soriano, and he was hitting doubles like crazy against the wall, but it just never materialized after that. It's really poor pitching that was out here. But like I've watched that guy since, he was first stateside, and the bat has just kind of regressed outside of last year where it just took off. But, again, his 1 year value is just amazing. All right. So talking about these,
so it's like an Ender Inciarte comp is not like a crazy idea.
No, I don't think so. Like if he ended up hitting 15 plus, I would not be shocked for the guy that I saw in the complex. What I would be shocked about is the path that he took. The contact rate just got worse, and it seemed like he was no longer trying to hit for the fences. He was just trying to get the bat on the ball to get on base so he could take advantage there. Like he's no longer more of a power swinger.
But if he's going to be that guy, then he needs to have better than a 20% strikeout rate.
Yeah, and that's his problem. I mean, I think it was like 30 plus at many points in the minor league. So, I mean, it's all these convoluted skill sets that you have to like taper down. It actually reminds me similar of like a pitcher that can throw 100, but they can't hit the broadside of a barn. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you've got to taper it down. You got to find your sweet spot. And I felt like he had to find his sweet spot, who he was as a hitter, because when he was a power hitter, he was swinging through everything.
I'm fascinated that you have Jordan Lawlar ahead of Jordan Walker. The only sort of negative I have on Lawlar is just that he's had labrum surgery.
Yeah. A lot of the Diamondbacks have. I mean, Carroll had a similar, I think it was a similar shoulder injury and surgery, but came back like game busters. So in the AFL,
and Lawlar also had a down year after his.
But Jordan Lawlar had a phenomenal year last year, and you guys didn't get to see it when you came out here for first pitch, which was unfortunate because Lawlar got hurt again, which is kind of a stinker and doesn't really help my argument. I would acknowledge there's probably like a little bit of homerism in it. I think these guys are next to each other. And from the perspective of like getting value now, Jordan Walker is slightly more valuable. But Lawlar just came off of a 2022 where he had 16 homers, 39 stolen bases while hitting over 300. He was a 345 slash guy, 303 average, 401 OBP. He comes out to the Arizona Fall League that you guys didn't get to see. He was hands down the best player in the Arizona Fall League to start. It was hits every day, multiple homers. Actually, if people want to check it, I have a funny homer he had in the AFL where he didn't think he got it and he kind of threw his bat down all pissed, and he did. And I kind of yelled to him after. You can see some of that homer power, but he was stealing bases at an aggressive clip. He was making all the contact in the world, and that was on a team that had
about how bad he looked in Double-A.
I mean, I'm not from a like this is what the development is. Like one level struggle to me isn't the be all end all, especially as these guys get pushed. That was an aggressive assignment that the Diamondbacks
20 years
just put on
old,
Jordan
Double-A.
Lawlar. Yeah. Well, but also think of the injury. Think of the missed time with the injury, and then this aggressive assignment where they push him, and they pushed him
3
to the
levels
AFL.
in 1 year too.
3 levels in 1 year is this big marker for me with going with the AFL. No, I'm going to look at the totality of his development through, and he came to the AFL and he was a monster. But you can look at Jordan Walker and you can see who he started off slow. He moved multiple levels, stole more. He's 6'5", 220 plus. He stole more bases than he hit homers last year, which is absurd to think about. And that's where those like Julio Rodriguez comps start to come in for a lot of people, because there's big power, there's big stolen bases from a big bodied guy who's going to play in the outfield now. That I think these guys are 1A, 1B. I would say like I have them literally within 2 spots of each other. So they're both inside the top 50. Deal.
But like I just chose to keep Noelvi Marte and Elly De La Cruz and trade away Jordan Lawlar in Ottoneu. So this is making me regret that decision.
Noelvi is not someone I feel the best about after watching a lot of him over the last couple of years.
I don't know that I could have gotten the same deal for Noelvi. So that's part of why I traded him, is because I got more for Jordan.
But getting Elly in that is huge.
No, I had Elly. The question for me was trade Elly De La Cruz or Jordan Lawlar for reinforcements.
So you traded Jordan
Lawlar away and kept. No, I had Noelvi, Jordan Lawlar, and Elly De Cruz on my team. Gotcha. And I was choosing who to trade. Now, trading away Noelvi probably wouldn't have, gotten me what I got. So it was really the choice was between Jordan Lawlar and Elly De Cruz. Where do you have Elly? I mean, Elly is amazing because I think if there's any sort of variability when it comes to Jordan, Elly's like through the roof when it comes to what he could be. He could be all or nothing. Like he could be amazing, or he could not be a major leaguer with the contact and walk rates he has.
And I have him high. I've got him at 57. And that again, like the thing that's going to rub people the wrong way with Dynasty are 2 things. It's older players being pushed down.
You have him ahead of Nolan Arenado.
What? And then the young guys being moved up, and the obvious argument if they have no professional time. But, in Dynasty, you are looking for the next big guy. Last year, doing a startup Dynasty, taking Julio Rodriguez would have had the same. I'm not saying that Elly or Jordan Walker will be that, but it would have had the same feeling. We were like, dang, you're taking these guys really high. Elly De La Cruz is a very volatile player. Like you said, he is one of those guys where it's like in 3 years, he could not be in the majors at all. He could maybe be in Japan, or he could be a first-round talent, because it's very Oneil Cruz-like, except it's much better plate discipline skills. I mean, there are big strikeouts and stuff like that, but it's not
he doesn't like strike out 50% of the time against lefties or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's fascinating, and it's 21-year-olds, but like the prospects I have in this range. So now if you kind of put them together, you've got Elly, Volpe, Walker, and Lawlar all in the top 60. They're all on the precipice of coming up. The Diamondbacks have already talked about midseason Jordan Lawlar is a possibility. Elly De La Cruz, I think, we can just visually see as a possibility. And Anthony Volpe, they're saying they're going to give him a spot or an opportunity to try to win a gig, though it looks like Oswalt Peraza. So the first set of prospects, are all guys that look like they are going to get playing time this year. And I think that makes it more palatable to stomach, where, like you said, oh my God, you're taking Elly over Nolan Arenado. Like that's where you can kind of stomach it.
I don't know. I think it's pretty close. It's really, really tough. That's the toughest part. But I think it's pretty close. That I think you could almost get whatever you want for Elly De La Cruz in a Dynasty League right now.
What do you mean? Like,
I mean, maybe not like Bobby Witt, like, maybe not a top 10 guy, but if you're talking about somebody who's 30 years or older,
Goldschmidt, Arenado, that type of thing.
I think you can maybe even get a Mookie for him. Like, I think you could push for it. I mean, you would have to add to it maybe, but
You'd have to add to it.
But Ellie's hot.
He's dynamic. I mean, he's and that's a a word that everyone hates. Like, what does that even mean? Elly De La Cruz inside the top 10 of my top 10 might be the most electric of all those players. 28 homers, 47 stolen bases, hit 300
average.
Yeah, lower OBP than a guy like Lawlar. I'd point out, Lawlar was over 400. Elly was around 350.
Big strikeout rates.
And big strikeout rates. That's exactly.
But the one thing that's missing for me and makes me feel a little bit blind when I'm doing prospect analysis is this sort of the StatCast data. And I hate to bring up Toro again, but like Toro, I think that the market showed us a little bit that Toro wasn't as good a prospect as maybe the stats look like when he was traded for Rafael Montero.
Yeah,
what was that deal? Rafael Montero and Kendall Graveman for Abraham Toro. Yeah,
that sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right.
So it's like a rental reliever and then a throw-in reliever. Montero ended up good, but like that's not what a really good prospect is traded for. That's when you sort of be like, oh, the bad ball stats must not be good. That's not true for Elly. Like I've heard about them. I haven't seen them, but I've heard that his like top end exit velocities are really amazing. So
yeah, and the more data
I think O'Neill Cruz is the comp a little bit with a little bit more refined, maybe.
Yeah, no, and I think it's sometimes it's lazy, but sometimes we have to just live in like lazy comp era because he's a tall, skinny guy, 6'5", 200, 158 strikeouts he had last year. He did push 2 levels, but he hit 300 at both levels, which is phenomenal. Doesn't walk in an insane amount, but I mean, again, the counting stats are loud and crazy. He simmered down a little bit at AA, which I would expect, but he's got the makings of a 30-30 guy, and that's why he is a top 10 prospect. And those are the guys that I'm the most stubborn about in any dynasty format. I am stubborn about trading off top 10 guys. Everybody else, I'm probably a lot more loose than people would expect as a prospect guy to trade off anybody outside, usually the top 10, because I think I can replenish, but there's a reason these guys are the top 10. It's the elite of elite. And that's also why they're really high on dynasty lists. That's why they sit there. A couple other guys that DVR had put in here that were interesting.
Well, hold on. Before you get there, I need to do this one real quick because I think those are lower down. At 65, you have a guy who had 26 plate appearances above A ball.
Okay, yeah.
And he is super hot right now in terms of, people talking about him. He's got all the helium in the world. Everyone's super excited about him. There are these breathless tweets of, no one this age has done this at that level since Mike Trout or whatever BS it is. But Jackson Chourio with the Brewers is 18 years old, and all of the good numbers that we're looking at almost all happened in A ball. Even high A was kind of boring. I mean, 119 WRC plus is not what you would think a top prospect had in high A. And then AA was, I'm not even going to bring up what the numbers were, but it was only 26 plate appearances. This smacks a little bit to me like I was really into Hedbert Perez last year. And there are all these guys that in A ball put up nasty numbers, and you're just like, can't even understand them. You're just looking at them on Fangraphs, just laughing. There's that meme looking at the data and laughing. Like that's what I think of when I think of like these A-ball guys. Convince me that Jackson Chourio is not one of these helium A-ball guys.
Well, there's always a possibility that this isn't going to pan out, but the couple reasons behind it is he was the youngest at every single stop. One of the big things that I've talked about a lot and I talked about in the last episode, it's just so fascinating. Like this guy was only supposed to play rookie ball last year. I hope everybody understands that. He was here in an extended spring training to wait and do a holdover. Extended spring training, by the way, for people, it starts in April and it goes all the way till rookie ball starts, which is usually like June, like mid-June or something like that, or maybe early July. And these guys just sit in the camps and they just train and they work out and stuff like that.
They get paid.
I don't think they get paid. I mean, they probably
get food and housing, I think.
Maybe, yeah, they probably get very little food. There's a couple teams that do it really well, by the way. The Rangers and Royals, who I live right next to, they have built their own complex. If
So you kind
anybody
of
doesn't
live
know,
at the complex.
yeah, I should take a picture if you guys have never seen it. It's really cool. It's essentially an apartment building that they built, and it's got their logo on it. And they let all of their guys who are in complex in whatever capacity stay there, which
It's
I think
like a
is
dorm.
so cool.
It's like
It's a
college
total
life.
dorm.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this when Josh Young was rehabbing last year, his very first game back. This is the most dorm thing of all. He in the stadium, like I'm behind home plate. If you look straight out, you can see the Rangers facility. 4 or 5 of his friends had big white flags, and they were up on like a balcony, and they were waving the flags as he was up to a bat. And I have a picture of them doing that. It was the most dorm thing possible. These guys literally actually walk out the stadium and just walk across the street, and they go over and they walk into their building. I actually ran into Kumar Rocker during complex. I got out of my car and he was just standing there
at night, dude.
It is a crazy place. It's a wild place, but it is very college atmosphere. All of that to say that, like, that's cool because those teams really take care of their players in at least one extra way where they give them housing. A lot of these other guys are not given that opportunity. So take all of that into context.
Chourio's 18 years old.
He's 17, I think, at that time. Right. He's in extended spring training. He's putting up 110 plus EVs a day over there, and they're starting to tweet about it. The team says, we're going to be a little bit aggressive, and we're going to put this kid who's 17 years old. We don't see that a lot. Here's a perspective. Marco Luciano, when he was 17, he rocked, but it was in complex league. This team said, all right, 17-year-old, we're going to push you to A-ball. And he absolutely dominated A-ball, dominated A-ball. 324, 12 homers, 10 stolen bases, a 600 slug. That is dominating A-ball, a place that he shouldn't have been. Next step up, the team says, all right, let's send you to high A. Does he dominate? No. Does he play fine?
But he's playing now. He's playing like people drafted out of college.
He's playing college guys. That's exactly right. High A guys would start coming in there. More advanced pitching. The pitching change you get from rookie ball and A ball to high A is different. Now he comes in. He only hits 252. Yeah, it's not great. 8 homers, though. 4 stolen bases. The strikeouts are still not insane.
Strikeout improved, though.
31 over 31 games. Then the team says, let's give you a taste right at the end as the season ends, and we give you double A, where he stunk.
18 years old.
18 years old. This guy is putting up 110 EVs all across the board, beautiful swings, and is aggressively sent. That says something. Now, do the Brewers have like the best developmental system as far as what they've done with their prospects? Well, no, but at the same time, this guy met every test as the youngest player at every single level. And I think that says a lot, but he's dangerous and he's risky because he did end the season really bad. There's so much hype put to him as an 18-year-old. And he is only, I believe, one of 3 teenagers inside my top 100. And the other 2, well, actually, only one of them has potential major league, which we'll talk about here shortly. The other guy is Drew Jones. So it's like him and Drew Jones are the only teenagers that sniff that. He's dangerous, and he's not a guy that I'm probably looking at if I'm in win now mode. But if we're talking about like,
that's a pretty aggressive ranking for Drew Jones, huh? I mean, like, what have you seen of him? It's just,
oh, I mean, he was the most dominant high school player. I mean, what did we see professionally? Unfortunately, nothing, because he got the shoulder hurt in BP with the Diamondbacks. But I mean, that was one of the most impressive high school seasons, hitting well over 500, countless homers, stolen bases, one of the more advanced batter's eye. And you also look at like what Jackson Holliday is doing and just think like scout after scout like Drew Jones over Jackson Holliday. And everybody likes Jackson Holliday now, and some outlets are going over that. So yeah, it's aggressive. But when you're looking at like these 18-year-olds and you're looking in a 3-year window, Jackson Chourio might actually help. He might actually get there. Like, he, as a 19-year-old, he could hit the majors in his development. Otherwise, what you have on your hand is you have the number 1 and maybe number 2 prospect in all of baseball in 1 or 2 years. And you can pull off a trade that you just did, like Jordan Lawlar. You got reinforcements. Not that you want to draft guys to like trade, but you also know. Yeah, you do. But you having Jordan Lawlar, you had a perceived top at least 10 prospect that you could get a haul for. If you were to invest in Chourio or Drew Jones, obviously it's a really high commitment, but maybe you're a guy that's like, I'm going to just draft a team that has all really young up and coming guys. Those are golden assets in those leagues. As soon as a team is trying to sell off, you're going to get all this stuff. You're going to get your starting pitcher, you're going to get your closer, and maybe you're going to get a serviceable outfielder. I don't know what your trade ended up looking like, but there's an extra value that's put in there. But I totally agree and knew that Chourio was going to stand out. I'm actually surprised I didn't see more about it, but that was my path of where it goes. It's like, you want hard hit data, he's got it. And he was the youngest at every single level, and meeting the test outside of AA is like really impressive. Like, how many guys do that? And I know it's tropey, but it's like, how many guys really do what he did? The danger is going to be if he falls off, we're all going to have like Jason Dominguez in our minds, I think, of a guy that got skyrocket and never lived up. If Chourio struggles, I think he is going to plummet lists early on. And I think it might be a mistake and a buying opportunity early on in the year.
Yeah, because he could have a good second half, and then all of a sudden everything's good again.
But AA, I mean, can you imagine starting
He's
in
still young
training?
at AA?
Yeah, he will still be probably one of the youngest players at AA if they put him back there. I do think there's a chance they could throw him at high A, and they could start him back at high A. I wouldn't discount that. One way I will look to is when minor league spring training starts up, these guys are put in groups, and they're put in their level groups. So like he will be put in either high A or AA, and he will play with that team versus other teams. And that sometimes is a telling, like, oh, this is where he's going to start in the minor leagues.
Also, because you don't want to group him with the AAs, and then at the end of spring be like, oh, you're going to high A, because then that's a good motion, right?
You want them to play with like their teammates and stuff like that. So it is very telling once the minor league spring training portion starts in like mid-March, which I will report back when I can, that like that might tell us exactly where he is. All right, you want to go to these other guys that DVR had on there?
Yeah.
They're interesting in Miguel Vargas being number 1, who I'm continuously moving up. I've always really loved Miguel Vargas. I have at 93 right now. I think there's room to grow for him to keep going up, especially with starting at second base. And the other one is Kyle Manzardo, which I think DVR was very happy about, that I have him inside the top 120. Sometimes it feels a little bit aggressive, and even where I have him, because after I told you guys in the last episode, I got to spend time with him like 2 weeks ago. I got to spend a couple hours with him, and he's a really great guy. He's a fascinating guy. And the news I told you guys about, that he's going to pick up a third base glove, or at least the Rays have asked him to pick up a third base glove, and he'll work on in spring training, opens up some opportunities. But at the same time, when I hear that, like, he's polar opposite to me and Miguel Vargas. Like, Miguel Vargas will start in the majors and might be a huge boon. Manzardo potentially picking up another glove, and the guys that they have signed as far as contracts go and the roster construction really is like watering down my thought of Kyle Manzardo playing this year. I really don't know if that's a possibility. If they want to have, tutelage him at third base or just be more flexible, this might be an entire year of just minor league adjustments, making good contact rates and defensively learning some other spots, which kind of hurts his value from a this year perspective. But what's your take on Manzardo and Miguel Vargas?
Yeah, Manzardo, I love the stats. I mean, just the combination of near 300 ISO with mid, sort of like 15% strikeout rate. That's so sexy.
Yeah.
If it was any other organization and I saw 122 plate appearances, 22 years old, just had a 148 WRC plus in AA, like, I'd be like, this guy is going to play a little bit at AA and the rest in the major leagues this year. That would be my guess. One of those start the season, and if he rockets, if he's killing it down there, then why have him down there? I just agree with you. This team construction, the problem is, I think that there is a pecking order, and you might know something about this, but there is a pecking order where it's kind of, it may seem silly, but it's meaningful to the prospects themselves, the players themselves, is that you get your shot, right? So Vidal Brujan may not be amazing, but he was the right guy at the right time, got his shot, and like, I think he's failed enough that
they know what they have.
Yeah. So then somebody else can get a shot. Right. I mean,
yeah,
Brujan, I'm not saying it's like the door's closed on Brujan, but like, he got a shot, and Wall's got a shot. So the next people who are going to get a shot for me are Jonathan Aranda and Curtis Mead. And neither of them, I mean, Mead is probably a decent third baseman, but Aranda is not really a great defensive player. And so he's going to end up probably near first or in that first corner grouping. So if you talk about that first corner grouping for the Rays this year, you're talking about Yandy Diaz, Harold Ramirez, Isaac Paredes, Jonathan Aranda. I mean, it's a long
A lot
list.
of guys.
Yeah,
that is a
so
long list.
It's just tough for him. I think for Vargas, you know, I think that they did sign David Peralta, which changes things a little bit. But they also had their manager saying, you know, I think I'm going to do Vargas at second.
Which is huge for them. They've also said that they were going to maybe do Mookie Betts at second this year, which he already qualifies on Yahoo at second base. And with any more games, if he gets enough, all of a sudden you might walk into 2024 if you have the bigger platforms of 20 games needed. If he does get there, that does change. I feel like Miguel is relatively safe regardless of what they're doing in the outfield. I was never a big Trace Thompson guy. James Outman, we'll see where the opportunity is, but like I just have a hard time believing they could keep Chris Taylor off the field, and I don't think they want to stunt Miguel Vargas. So that's what's so different about these two guys. Everybody wants Kyle Manzardo to succeed this year, but I think it's not really going to be a payoff. Do you think when you look at that rank, knowing what you know about the Rays, are you comfortable with Kyle Manzardo? It's like a top 115 overall dynasty player in your mind?
The bar is pretty high for first baseman, you know, and that's why in traditional rankings, you probably won't see Manzardo as high, right?
No.
Because they don't care about your fantasy numbers, and they realize there's not that much defensive value for first baseman, and then the bar is so high, you actually have to be like 6 to 8% better than league average to be average at first base, you know. So that's a tough one. Also, knowing kind of how the organization treated Nate Lowe. Is that relevant? I don't know. Nate Lowe had pretty good numbers in the minor leagues. It seemed like he was going to be the first baseman. They needed a first baseman. They let him try it a couple times, and they just traded him away.
But again, the flexibility, that was the one thing I think is interesting is like they believed. I mean, again, he told me
that I mean, if he can actually play some
third,
I think that would actually change things. I think they love guys that can move around.
I think that helps the potential idea of like traditional first baseman. That's why I found it such an interesting tidbit when he told me, because it might open up even the traditional eye that, oh, the team themselves want to experiment and see if they can move him beyond here, because the talk has always been, well, he's just like a first base. Like he's just first base only, not even outfield or anything like that. And I don't think that's the case. He's kind of very big, like very lumberjacky. He has like a lumberjack feel, but this is a guy that, you know, they might have even wanted as a second baseman. But you bring up the great point is the first tries are going to go to Aranda and probably Curtis Mead. And that really, you're going to have a lot of injuries or a lot of roster movement for Kyle Manzardo to be able to break that this year, where I think they would just want him to succeed in the minors. That also, I think, leaves fantasy people a little bit susceptible. If he continues at his rate, and if people just don't understand, or they're not, you know, I know you guys have talked about him, but like 327 he hit across 2 levels last year, which was phenomenal, hitting over 320 at both of those levels. Strikeout numbers low, contact numbers high, and he had over 20 homers. If he does that again, it's going to be a top 5 guy in fantasy. I mean, you're just not going to be able, it doesn't matter what position he plays at that point.
Because I mean, it's the same stuff that I like out of Miguel Vargas, right? And Miguel Vargas did not have the same power, you know? I love Miguel Vargas's low strikeout rate, his high walk rates. I love his 200 ISOs. But sometimes, you know, I've said, you know, I think I said on the last show, sometimes the 200 ISO is not all batted ball power. Some of that's can be legs, and he obviously has some legs. You know, it's only 50 plate appearances, but a 106 max EV in the major leagues leaves me kind of wondering what the raw power is like for Miguel Vargas. I mean, the Fangraphs grade is only 45-45. So is this going to be more of a hit tool guy in your estimation? A guy who's going to hit 280 with 20 homers? Is that the Miguel Vargas you're expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting a guy that is going to be able to tap into 20 on the power, is going to be able to be at a prime position at second base, and has a really high floor as far as strikeout and walkability. Like that, those are things that I want. Like those high floor guys. I think some of the and that's a crazy battle, by the way. We were talking about like Elly, where you've got incredible ceiling, the sky's the limit type of guys, but there's a lot of volatility. There's something to me about those players that have those really high floors, especially when it's built around contact and not a lot of strikeouts, that it's like their ability to tap in, I think, is at any moment. Paul Goldschmidt was a prime example of a guy that was never trying to hit homers. And then as he just developed in the majors, he continuously was able to hit for more power and shut everybody up with his weird swing. And those are those type. Manzardo kind of has that feel.
Vargas's pull rates aren't really huge, right? So, I think Goldie's an interesting pull because Goldie learned to pull the ball. And that's, pulling the ball selectively while keeping his oppo approach has been, I think, the big boon to his career. So Vargas adds some pulling to this because, last year, 37% pull rate, that's below average. So if he can put together his good contact with pulling the ball in the air some, yeah, I mean, like I'm always looking for Mookie Betts. I'm always looking for Mookie Betts because I want my guys to work out, and so I want low bus rates, and I don't normally roster Elly De La Cruz guys, but in Ottoneu, it doesn't take that much. Like you just put $1 or $2 on the guy and you keep him for a while. That's all it takes. It takes being maybe a week early, on the hype, so it's not the same as certain dynasty leagues. You have to draft the guy in the prospect draft, which happens at the end of the year, and you have to take Elly 1-1. And I think I'd be more likely to take a Vargas or a Lawlar or somebody where I'm like, he doesn't strike out 35% of the time. Exactly. So I'm always looking for Mookie Betts, and Miguel Vargas has a little bit of that Mookie Betts thing with the low strikeout rates, the high walk rates, and the good power, but not great power.
Let's finish with this. We've got some fun episodes on the Tuesdays we're going to be doing, and we're going to be talking about redraft prospects. But I did want to hit this. I mentioned that there were 3 teenagers that were on the top 100, which I know is a wild thing to think about. One of those is being given the opportunity to break camp in the rotation, which is absurd. And it's Andrew Painter. The 3 of the most fascinating pitching prospects in my mind, even for this year, we can have a bigger conversation about it, but from just a overall dynasty perspective, and as far as their rank goes, are Grayson Rodriguez, Andrew Painter, and then I'm even going to throw in Brandon Pfaadt. A lot more conversation. I've been talking about.
Let me throw Ricky Tiedemann in there.
Ricky Tiedemann. I have Ricky Tiedemann over Yuri Perez. I'm so glad you did because I love him. I really, really love Ricky Tiedemann.
And he's also just knocking on the door. Like that rotation has like Mitch White for floor, but in terms of ceiling, I think Nate Pearson's not giving them anymore. So if they need ceiling, like if Barrios doesn't come back, they're going to put Tiedemann in there and see if he can be their number 2.
Yeah, he's been very, I've comped like, he's very like Shane McClanahan, just pumps his own. I love him. Brandon Pfaadt led the minors in strikeouts. There's a fascinating, someone tweeted this out. When you look at last year, pitchers that went 6 or more innings, it was like Kyle Harrison was number 2 at like 5. And Brandon Pfaadt had like 16 games where he went 6 or more. He's phenomenal the whole year.
That's important. That's really important because I've been looking at innings per appearance and batters faced per appearance, and they're really low in the minor leagues.
So with these
There's
guys,
a lot of guys who face like 10 batters per appearance in the minor leagues.
And that's not Brandon Pfaadt. Grayson Rodriguez and Andrew Painter are my top 2 pitchers in my prospect ranks. They're my top 2 prospect pitchers in Dynasty. And Grayson looks like he's got a rotation spot given to him, unless, he fumbles it. And Andrew Painter is going to be given an opportunity as a 19-year-old, which is absurd. So I'm just curious at your take, maybe even ranking these guys as much as you want to with Grayson, Andrew Painter, Ricky Tiedemann, and Brandon Pfaadt. Any thoughts in any rank?
I'm a little biased against changeup guys, actually. I'm nervous about them. They are really tough to model. They're really kind of tough to see. You see the game is going away from the changeup. It's, they throw it less, and try to think of who are the most elite starting pitchers with changeups. And you say that Gossman, Sandy. It's not that many.
Yeah, I'm like Sandy.
Yeah, Gossman's a splitter. So if you don't want to, put those in, then you're looking at Sandy. So, and Sandy had a little bit of struggle at the beginning of his career too. So if you just want someone to hit the ground running, I love the idea of an elite fastball and elite breaking ball, which is Andrew Painter.
Okay, so
So
you're
I
you're
think
biggest. Are you Andrew Painter over Grayson Rodriguez?
maybe that's those are I'm an inherently biased person, but that's what I would love to have is like to think about like Strider, McClain, like a lot of these guys that hit the ground running. They're young, they have really big fastballs and a great breaking ball, and this is a breaking ball league. So it's picking the nits though, because I'm not going to say I don't like Grayson Rodriguez as a prospect. I have seen his stuff numbers; they're good. So they're great, so I'm into him. But Painter, maybe just a nose ahead. And then Tiedemann, and who was the fourth?
And Brandon
Oh,
Pfaadt. Brandon
Pfaadt.
Pfaadt's a little bit further down the list, but I mean, he was the most dominant pitcher in the minors last year, and it's hard to argue across the board with.
I just feel like the D-backs, if we're talking about sort of this year, then that's what I'm talking about. Because I think long term I might like Grayson better because he has a larger arsenal. Right now, I'm really sure that Andrew Painter has a great fastball and great breaking ball. I don't know about third and fourth pitches, whereas Grayson, I'll give him the credit. I think he has a full arsenal. With Pfaadt, I'm worried that the D-backs have to run through some options in that rotation first. I really like Ryan Nelson better than most people. And so I think Nelson's going to get that shot over Jameson. Maybe Jameson heads to the pen because at some point they need one of their starting pitchers to head to the pen because that pen is bad. It's maybe one of the worst in baseball this year. And this is a team that is starting to get close to contention. So if they start to win some games, they are going to push somebody that used to be a starter into the bullpen, I think. Because you're talking about what's their worst problem? They need shortstop, Jordan Lawlar. That's their worst problem offensively. If once they get Jordan Lawlar, I feel like this team could compete as it is.
And a big power,
I like
fastball
Thomas,
slider guy in Dre
Corbin
would be
Carroll.
great.
Yeah. But they need a bullpen, yeah. And Nelson's going to move up, and then maybe they give Jameson a shot before Pfaadt. So if you're talking about sort of pecking order and who's going to get the chance, I feel like Nelson gets the fifth man job out of spring training. Jameson gets the first shot if somebody gets hurt, and Pfaadt only comes up if somebody gets hurt for like the year or if there's another injury, which obviously happens all the time. But they have 1 through 6 right now with some young guys in there. So I'm just not sure how many innings Pfaadt will get in the major league this year.
And that's a big question. Any last thoughts on Ricky Tiedemann?
I think Tiedemann is gonna play in the major leagues this year. I think I really like his slider. I want to know more about his command. He got a pretty poor present value 20 command from Fangraphs when they looked at him. But it's in the numbers it hasn't been that bad. But I do think that they kind of need him, and I think the Blue Jays right now have Kikuchi versus White for 5th. Whoever loses that is probably in the pen, so that means Tiedemann's the 6th starter in Toronto.
And if the opportunity comes up, 29 walks over 78 innings with 117 strikeouts last year, had a barely over 2 ERA over 18 starts, pound the zone, strikes everybody out. He is a fascinating guy who went 3 levels as well. He went from low A all the way up to double A. And in double A, he was his worst ERA, which was 2.45. It was a 2.45 ERA, striking out 14 in 4 games. He's going to start at double A, and next thing you know it, he might be in that rotation. It's really interesting. And in a couple weeks, especially with camps are starting up on Wednesday. They're going to be going on, obviously, through all spring. We're going to just get a lot more information. We're going to get notes and nuggets of guys doing this and teams doing this, that it's going to even be a better time for us to dig into prospects that are going to help in redraft for this year. We're going to do that in a couple of weeks. And in the next couple Tuesdays, when we're doing these Prospect Dynasty ones, I think we're going to focus on hitting prospects and pitching prospects. So we're going to be a little prospect heavy for a couple of weeks, and we might alter some things that people can look out for. But if you guys want, you guys can check out the Dynasty Ranks. You can leave a wonderfully kind, nice comment to me to make me feel so nice, and I'll smile. You can make me smile if you
welcome him to the Rates and Barrels family.
That's right. Do something. Everyone actually said very, very nice things. If you don't already have a sign up and a login and an account, you can do that. Just go over to theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. $2 a month for the first year is going to get you rocking. You can get my stuff and you can get all of Eno's fantastic artists and everybody's. It's really cool. The app is great. You can listen to the podcast there and you can check all of it out and support. So theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Go and sign up today. And hopefully we get news of baby VR coming here soon. So we're all thinking about Derek, and hopefully we're making everything positive for you guys. You guys are going to have Al and Eno later in the week. And that's going to wrap everything up. Thank you guys so much for listening and putting up with me. Eno, thank you so much for all the talk. And we'll talk to you next time right here on Rates and Barrels.
Thanks for listening.